Welcome to B2B and Flux. This is where we dig into how marketing, sales, and buyers connect in today's B2B world. What's working, what's broken, and what's evolving.
Welcome to the Fast Forward podcast for B2B marketers who want to understand the people and customers they are really selling to. In B2B software and tech marketing, we often talk about the buying committee or the decision-making unit. That's the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, the COO. We know the deal is rarely one person. It's usually 6 to 10 stakeholders all pulling information in parallel. It's a multi-threaded, change-driven process that often feels messy from the inside. But to the marketing team trying to reach them, those stakeholders don't always feel like real people. They'll stay as titles on a slide, a persona in a deck, or a summary pulled from an LLM. This podcast is a set of short conversations with the buying committee, the real people behind those roles that you're targeting. I want you to hear how they actually work day to day, the pressures they deal with, what they pay attention to, what they ignore, and which marketing content they genuinely consume when a decision is on the line. My goal is simple. It's to give you a clearer edge and help you drop what doesn't work, double down on what does, and refine your marketing and sales approach to how buyers really behave. Today, I'm joined by Neil Bhay. He's a CTO who's been involved in multiple tech and software negotiations throughout his career. We'll keep this chat informal and practical, focusing on what buying looks like from his seat and what vendors get right and wrong when they try to win stakeholders in his position. So let's get into it. Neil, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. Okay, so let's set the stage. What's your role, and give us a tweet-sized version of your career path and what kind of industries and organizations you've worked in.
This might be a little bit larger than a tweet, but I've operated in engineering leadership capacity for the last 25 years at various companies. It could be in companies that were in the several $billion of revenue, which could be Paramount, HBO, Gartner. And I've also operated in mid-sized companies, which could be in the $50 to $100 million range in revenue. And also I've operated in the startup area, which could be anywhere from somebody who just has an idea with no funding to they just closed a VC deal and they now are looking to scale. So my path has been mostly in a full-time capacity at a lot of these companies, but I've actually transitioned into what is now called a fractional CTO role, which is operating more in a consultancy in the C-suite for various companies. And they're usually going to be now more the mid-size to startup area, which the world of problems that they're facing is usually very diverse.
Okay, great. So you're going to have a breadth of experience to draw upon.
Sure.
Okay, so what is the one part of your job that every marketing and sales rep thinks you care about or do, but actually makes your eyes roll and is not really what you do?
Well, I think the part that a lot of marketers might get wrong is that I might be focused on how many features you have in your tool set, and uh, whether you have AI or not. Like it's how AI powered you are is really not a concern of mine. It's really about I think most people in the sales world will have always know to realign to what are the customer needs, right? So understanding what are the problems that your customer has and trying to identify with those and seeing how your product correlates with
Mm-hmm.
that need, and then really kind of focusing on the outcomes that you get from incorporating your product or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And so do you see people trying to approach you talking about features and things like that rather than what you actually care about?
Yeah, definitely. I think that generally happens. It happens anywhere from product sales. It happens to job, inquiries. Uh, just as an analogy, right? I get approached for project manager roles from recruiters.
Mm.
Even though so clearly don't know what my background is. They don't know what my problems I actually solve. So when
Mm-hmm.
you get these emails that don't really understand your context, it's really kind of a challenge. So and on the sales side of like a SaaS application, generally, I also do get things that are just way off, out in left field, not related to the products I'm dealing with or anything I've talked about or anything
Mhm.
like that.
Okay. So take me back to a recent specific software or tech purchase because I think it will help. If you want to name whatever that solution was, great. If not, you don't need to. So before you ever visited a website for that solution, what was step one for you when you're trying to do something? Is it a private Slack group? Do you text former colleagues? Like where does research typically start for you?
Uh, well, I think the research really starts internally, right? It's like it's more self-reflection within the company or the client that I have,
Mhm.
understanding what the problem is, what are we trying to solve, and depending on which company you're working at, uh, the next step is really if it's a multi-billion-dollar company, there's a lot of internal processes to kind of figure out, working with the different departments, trying to understand what that problem is that you're trying to solve, understanding what their needs are before we actually even go and approach anybody. I think as you get smaller into smaller companies, I've actually been leveraging more peer-centric networking groups,
Mm.
be it ones that are on Slack channels, in-person networking, things like that, to actually get secondary opinions or actually primary opinions on what do they recommend as a product and they've had a background with.
Mhm. So you mentioned then if we're talking like enterprise level, the kind of sales that happen at level, like when are you typically brought into that process? Because you said you have to speak with internal stakeholders. Does somebody come to you with a need or a request and then you research it? Are you going to them? Like how does that specifically work?
It could go multiple ways, right? So I've gone into companies where a product selection has already happened, and I'm really just coming along the contract basis and the evaluation and due diligence part of the the product assessment. There's also cases where we've initiated things where, based on a need that was identified in the company, um, when do we come in? Uh, Sometimes a lot of the assessment of what the business needs are have happened before they come to me. And it becomes in a larger company, it might become a larger roadmap initiative or a driver driven by an OKR, like, hey, we need to transition to this new system. As an example, I was the CTO at a company called Trusted Media Brands. They do a lot of video centric work. And so they were looking for a video dam solution at that time. When I joined the company, they'd already gone through that internal vetting, and it was really down to a few vendors when I came in. And my task as the technology leader was to do that due diligence to figure out which one aligned best with our needs. And I have a very, I think each leader will have their own sort of focus that they are looking at key criteria, be it security, be it vendor lock-in, be it cost, right? So I think every technology leader will bring in their own lens from their own experience and try to look at tools in a variety of different ways.
Mhm. Okay, that kind of leads into what I want to know is like, how is AI actually changing the way you research? What is specific? Like, what is it? What are you able to do now with AI that you weren't able to do before when it comes to comparing suppliers for what you're
Yeah,
particularly interested in?
yeah, that's a great question. I think uh, when I was in a full-time capacity, AI was not a leading tool to be participatory in any evaluation. So I think where I am now with at least the vendor evaluations that I do now, it I use it as a tool to second guess myself in terms of, hey, I'm looking for these sort of things. What are the weaknesses in what I'm looking for? I also look at it as a tool to uh, ask the right questions. Sometimes there are things that I might be very focused on that I might not know right off the bat with the specific tool. So it's definitely a secondhand uh, uh, capability that enhances whatever initial judgments or evaluation criteria I already might have. So I think if you look at like when you're writing an email, you might write that first draft, and then if AI comes in and rewrites your email, it comes up with some good ideas, and you're like, "Oh, that's actually really, that's something I would not have done before."
Mhm,
So I think it becomes an enhancer to kind of that evaluation criteria when I look at vendors.
mhm. And with the vendors and the research you're doing, does some point you want to speak to the actual vendor? Are you doing your research to prepare yourself to actually speak to the vendor? And then when you do speak to the vendor, who does someone in your role want to speak to? Is it the salesperson? Is it someone more technical?
Um, I do think a lot of these sales pitches I get aren't necessarily understanding the problems of the integration. So sometimes having a technical person involved in initial sales is definitely helpful. Um, I think that helps actually draw some more correlation between what my needs are, and knowing that they have a better understanding of it if there's a technical person involved in that sales.
Mhm,
Otherwise, it ends up being a lot of jargon that might not necessarily relate to what I'm actually working on.
mhm. And in marketing, maybe you know about this now, we do something called ABM, account-based marketing, where you're trying to target the different job roles within organizations. And so someone in a CTO role, they'll be like, okay, we need to be targeting these with this kind of information or that kind of information. From what you just said then, you're probably not looking for the marketing spiel. You would be looking to, if they were going to target you, if they already know you're involved in a deal, the technical details, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be looking about from my angle. It's really going to be looking at the implementation details. I always look at like also vendor lock, and I've definitely gone to a lot of companies where they bought into a product and now they're kind of stuck in that swamp and can't get
Mm-hmm.
out. So I'm looking at beyond the the success of the deal. I'm also looking at the failure of the deal afterwards. Obviously, I'm looking at like what are the per costs, the per transaction cost or anything else that might affect our ability to manage it, and also the operational costs of those things. So speaking to things that are relevant to the tech company or the tech group is definitely a higher priority, and you want to not treat your customers as a monolith where everything is going to be the same sort of um, issues that somebody might be concerned with. I will give you some other examples. I think usually when we bring in a vendor for an evaluation, I'm usually not the only one at the table. If it's a product that is solving a problem in my tech department, I'm really going to be focused on the things that I'm very familiar with that I'm looking to solve. Whereas if it's a marketing tool or something like that, they're probably going to be at the table trying to understand what needs they need met by the sales pitch or the solution.
Mm-hmm. You said something interesting then that you're looking at things like lock-in periods and things like that. I guess that's not the question you're asking the sales guy, right? Because you're going to get a different question. Where are you specifically looking for that?
Uh, I would actually ask that up front, right? I'm very I'm one of the few, I don't know if I'm one of the few, but I definitely feel I'm very transparent about what my needs are. So I will be asking, what happens afterwards, like this once this deal ends. What is an exit? What would that look like? And
Mhm,
so I will ask those questions up front.
mhm,
And if they don't know it, that's fine. But
mhm,
uh, I I think being very transparent about what my needs are as a client are pretty important to be having a good relationship. I think I apply this in all aspects of my life. When I was in my 20s and dating, very upfront. When I was in interviews, I'm very upfront and transparent. And I think what you see is what you get. So
mhm,
maybe that's most technology people. We're there to solve a problem. So being political and trying to hold back information is not something that's going to lead to success.
mhm. Okay, makes sense. Okay, so data shows individuals are typically 70% of the way through the buying journey before they ever talk to sales. So if I give you a scenario, if you land on a vendor's site and you want to see something, whether it's pricing, technical, demo, and it's behind a gated form, will you fill that in or will you bounce?
Um, if it's a cold website visit, I would probably bounce. I need some level of confidence before I go through a gated channel. I think if I am going through um, a gated channel, it's usually come by way of a reference that somebody else has said, "Hey, you should look at this tool," and you know that might execute a path forward. I also get some great ideas for where certain solutions might solve things through YouTube YouTube
Mhm,
reviews. things like that, a podcast like this.
Mhm.
So sometimes I will hear things through that, and I'll be interested in hearing what that product might do because I've already kind of heard the value through these various mediums of how it could solve certain problems that I'm looking at.
Mhm. Makes sense. I mean, you're familiar sitting in high stakes meetings with other C-level executives. Like, what is the biggest mistake you see vendors make when they try to pitch the whole team in the same way?
Well, that goes back to the treating everyone as a monolith, right? So, I
Mm,
mean, everyone has their own unique problems, I think, within each department or operationally. If you're not speaking to your customers' problems and focusing and tailoring your answer to what everyone's needs are, I think you are going to dig yourself into a hole.
mhm,
Um, so, yeah, I think having a multi-stakeholder narrative is really important when you go into any meeting.
mhm. As you've seen, marketers pump out content all day long. But looking back at that tech deal you were speaking about earlier, like what actually influenced you to behave, to engage with those? Is it like white papers, user reviews? Like what content, if any, do you consume before you spoke to new vendors? You've kind of touched on this, but can you expand on that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think if there is usually there's a problem I'm trying to solve, right? So I think there's either a mandate that I have as a organizational leader, or there is some inefficiency we've kind of spotted, and there's a project ongoing, and sometimes we don't want to build that internally. So, um, knowing that I have this thing to solve, you have that build versus buy decision you have to sometimes make,
Mm,
and like I said, the podcast or YouTube, sometimes that sort of research is the content you might be looking at in advance. Um, Going to the website, sometimes cursory stuff like that, LinkedIn, posts sometimes, but I'd say volume is not going to be a big driver. But I definitely know there's a psychology aspect to marketing, right? So they say, I think there was this book that said uh, with I think it's like 30 something impressions, people will draw a correlation with that product and the brand, right? So, or like, so if I was looking for CRM and I got, 30 impressions in my feed and I've seen it like 30 something times, that starts to make an impression with your user. So, I think there's a whole suite of psychology involved in that. So maybe it is content that might influence things because
mhm,
you might see something enough to actually correlate it to the thing that you're looking for.
mhm,
But I will tell you that I'm not looking for the volume of content. I'm actually coming in with a problem in mind, and if maybe that volume of content eventually associates to what that problem is that I have in my mind, maybe that's there's some accuracy in that.
okay, interesting. Before you ever agree to the first meeting with a sales rep, like what are your top non-negotiables? Like what must be checked before someone can get 30 minutes with you?
Um, what can be checked? Um, you know, I think some advanced preparation, so it really sets the I guess the guardrails for what we're going to be talking about. Um, I think showing that you've done your homework on uh, what I'm looking for and correlating that, I think that is probably going to be a big driver for that that initial meeting.
Mhm,
Um, to some extent, I think we all make that mistake of saying, "Hey, this is me. I'm this product," and then we don't. We expect that itself will sell things, but I think, like I said, you have to understand what your client or your customer wants, and
mhm,
so going in beforehand, showing what those that you're addressing those needs, and I think I'll add on to that. It might not only be the problems; it might be the sort of criteria that somebody might have when evaluating products. So whether it be it, let's say it's security of the product, data ownership, the vendor lock-in stuff, right? Like speaking to those criteria in relation to the needs of the customer might be good preparatory work before you even have that sort of meeting.
mhm. Okay, last question. Speaking to directly to the marketers that might be listening to this, what is one tactic, habit, or trend that you see right now or have seen recently that you think they should stop doing immediately because it just doesn't work?
Um, Stop selling me on how AI will solve everything. I think really that's kind of the generic answer. I think a lot of every solution out there right now is an AI powered this and AI powered that. Um, I personally think AI in certain cases will deliver, and in certain cases it's a lot of hype, and there's some aspect of it that's overblown. Will AI get everything right the first time? I mean, we definitely know from our own experiences that you do get some level of hallucination. You get, you don't always get the high quality product you're expecting. It speaks uh, in biased information delivery. So I think the AI hype in a initial engagement is probably not the best way to go. Um, and I would say going where your customer is, as opposed to just blanket, uh, you know, LinkedIn posts or email outreach is probably also a good way to go. I think personal connection matters a lot. So, like I said, I go through my peers to get recommendations. I think going to these networking events and like presenting yourself, tech people are a lot of these startup engagements. So I think there's a lot you can do from in-person engagement
Mm.
to kind of get your foot in the door.
Okay, so when you say going where your customer is, you mean physically where they are and be in
Yes.
front of them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Are you seeing a disconnect, Neil, between how people are saying AI is taking over their industries in the world on LinkedIn, for example, of it's doing this and that, and then the companies you're actually dealing with and speaking to and how they're doing it? Because I see a huge disconnect that with our clients. I see how marketers on LinkedIn are promoting how they're using it, and I see some of our clients and they're scrambling sometimes just to kind of get by and with the velocity of what's going on, not at the absolute forefront of using AI.
Yeah, so I've been on governance committees for a variety of companies, and I think there is some sort of disconnect of how do they apply AI to their existing systems. So I think this is probably another area where coming and saying, "Hey, AI will solve everything," is that some of your customers don't even know how they would apply AI to their to their problems, right? So if they don't have a self awareness of what they're looking to solve with AI, then you'll probably have a hard time coming in and saying, "Hey, AI will be this magic bullet." Um, so I think that self-awareness of where companies have inefficiencies is probably a deficiency that will derail that approach.
Brilliant. Neil, thank you so much for your time and insights. That's been great.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great questions. I really love being here. So.
Thanks for spending time with us on B2B and Flux. To learn more, head to somebodydigital.com.